to get to our very first panel discussion. Okay, now, Tracey, you spoke about having that information part of your rate card. Binwe, you said rate cards, maybe not. So let's talk about those two things because they're key in setting your rates and having communication with a brand. So media kit, rate cards. Those are separate things, but sometimes they kind of, some people put them together, some people put them apart. Let's talk about those specific items. Binwe, from your point of view, necessary, not necessary?
Well, in order to answer that question, I want to piggyback on what Tracey's just said, which is that I suppose in the Shakespearean tradition, know thyself. Are you really an influencer? Let's start there. Because the number of DMs I get of people who've posted once in their life, now, babes, they want a manager. No, hold on, Stoppy Lori. Are you a content creator? Are you hyper visible? Or do you have influence? Those are all very different things. So your rate, your media kit, the way you present yourself is all necessary, but it must be saying exactly what it is that your leverage is, as Tracey said. So the Seth Maps example is perfect because I think Seth's leverage is the quality of content, the ability to connect with audiences, whereas Maps, there's a hyper visibility because of, family connections and their own hustle and that. So for me, you must start there. Are you the one? and then of course, then obviously I think a media kit is important, but I don't like media kits where you're just telling me random stats. What I want to know ultimately is what is your singular intervention into this industry, into your space that is quite unlike anybody else's. That's all your media kit should be driving to. Is that so what? Is that if you were to work with me, you get this. So the media kit is really it's not an Excel spreadsheet for you to put stats there. Of course, the info and the stats are really important, but ultimately, what is your value proposition? You've got to get that nailed down. And then that's why for me, a rate card it's neither here nor there. I think you must have one internally so that you have a kind of a baseline. But ultimately, like if you think about somebody like Sibu, who kind of lives in those different categories, the leverage that you might be using in a context where you're a brand ambassador and what that value proposition is, and therefore what the RAND value is very different to a scenario where it's actually you creating the content, because then it's also you thinking of yourself as a producer. So for me, a rate card is fine, but I think that we're getting to a point where those roles are getting so fluid that ultimately you can end up selling yourself short because you've decided you are this one thing, and then all of your effort goes into trying to curate a rate around it. As I say, important, necessary, you've got to have it, you've got to do the hustle of sending it around and keeping yourself at top of mind. But ultimately, I think also rates, particularly when people have overblown them because of numbers, can be very disappointing when then people work with those people on brands. And yes, they have the influence and the visibility, but their content don't bang. Now it's awkward for everybody. So I think it's fine, do the stuff, do the media kit, but know why you're doing it and what it is that you're trying to communicate to brands about you when you do it.
I've noticed is that majority of the time, this is our influencer industry in general in South Africa, but majority of the time, the people who put their rates the lowest are women and Black women, or put their rates the least. So I had a conversation, I actually saw this in one of their videos. Michali and Yals had a conversation, and they both, I don't think they'd realized that they had both spoken to me, and then they brought it up and they were like, oh, you spoke to Sibu too. Yeah, Sibu told me to up my rates. There was a time I was making more money off of post than Michali Ndamase. And I said, Michali, no ways. That makes no sense, dude. That doesn't make sense. And so I sat it down, we both sat down and was like, your rates have to go up. You are incredible at what you do. Your rates have to go up. If it's not just your numbers, it's the level of your content. So I think for me, it just comes from a honesty perspective. Like you said earlier, I'm very open about how much money I make. I feel like it helps all of us in general. And sometimes it does backfire. But for me, it's just a matter of talking to people and being honest with them and saying, hey, listen, and not being ashamed of the money that we make. I think with what Binwe said earlier, I sometimes have that shame, hey, where I'm like, I don't work like some of my friends work. Like they wake up in the morning at 6 a.m., go to work, get in a taxi, work the whole week, even on weekends sometimes, and they still make half the money that I make. And if I decide that I don't want to work for the entire week because I'm just not feeling up to it, I can do that and still make the same amount of money. So sometimes I feel that shame of like, people with degrees and all are making like less money. So how can I ask for 100,000 Rand for a campaign? But I think it's just a matter of the industry we work in. The kind of industry we work in, you can make a lot of money. And I feel like we shouldn't be ashamed of asking for that same amount of money when people have been doing it for years. The advertising industry makes gang money.